The champagne flute trembled in my hand as James Harrison's voice carried across the ballroom. "Miss Mitchell, I had no idea you'd be here." The crystal chandelier light seemed to intensify, making everything too sharp, too clear. My brother Marcus froze mid-stride, his new bride Jessica's arm still linked with his as they'd been moving to greet the CEO they thought was there to honor them. "We've been trying to arrange a meeting for weeks," Harrison continued, striding toward me with his hand extended. "I didn't expect to run into you at an employee's wedding." The background chatter of the reception dimmed as if someone had turned a volume knob. I could feel my family's eyes boring into me. My mother's confusion, my father's furrowed brow, and Marcus's dawning horror as his CEO bypassed him completely to shake my hand instead. "Hello, James," I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. "Surprised to see me here? Why wouldn't I be? It's not every day you run into the CEO of Aurora Consulting at a company wedding." He glanced at Marcus, then back at me, realization dawning in his eyes. Wait, is Marcus your brother? I confirmed, allowing myself a small smile as the color drained from Marcus's face, though he didn't know about my position until just now. "My name is Sophie. I'm 34 and the secret founder of a billion-dollar consulting firm. This is the story of how I transformed from my family's afterthought to their entire world's axis. For years, I'd kept my true position hidden from my family, letting them believe I worked at a tiny consulting firm while I secretly built an empire. Every Sunday dinner, every holiday gathering, every family event had been the same. My parents fawning over Marcus's latest achievement at Sterling Industries, while barely acknowledging my existence. "Oh, Marcus got another promotion," my mother would gush, while my father would clap him on the back. "Sterling Industries is lucky to have you, son." Then, almost as an afterthought, "And how's your little job going, Sophie?" I'd smile and say, "Fine, Mom." The consulting work keeps me busy, while mentally reviewing the multi-million-dollar deal I'd closed that morning, or the new office I was opening in Singapore. What they didn't know, what they'd never bothered to ask, was that the tiny consulting firm I supposedly worked for was actually Aurora Consulting Group, one of the largest business advisory firms in the country, and I wasn't just an employee, I was the founder and CEO. The truth was, Sterling Industries had been struggling lately. In fact, they'd been desperately trying to arrange a meeting with my company's CEO, me, for months. I'd seen their financial reports through my industry connections and knew they were drowning in debt. They needed a lifeline, and Aurora Consulting was their only hope. But tonight, at Marcus's opulent wedding to the Sterling CEO's daughter, everything was about to change. The silence that followed Harrison's question was deafening. I could see my mother's hand trembling as she clutched her champagne glass, my father's jaw hanging open in shock. But it was Marcus's expression that truly captured the moment. A mixture of disbelief, embarrassment, and dawning horror as he realized he'd just spent the last hour mocking his boss's boss's boss. Harrison looked between us, clearly trying to process this revelation. "Your brother?" But he said his sister worked at a small local consulting firm. "That's what they all thought," I said, my voice carrying clearly in the stunned silence. "I never corrected them." Jessica's wine glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the marble floor. The sound seemed to break the spell of silence, and suddenly everyone was talking at once. But I kept my eyes on Marcus, watching as his carefully constructed world of superiority crumbled around him. Just an hour earlier, he'd pulled me aside, champagne in hand and new bride on his arm. "Still hiding in corners at parties. Some things never change." Jessica had giggled, adjusting her designer dress. "Oh, Marcus told me all about your little consulting job. It's so cute that you're trying to make it on your own." "Someone has to do the small jobs," Marcus had continued, his voice carrying just enough for nearby guests to hear. "Poor sis, still working at that tiny firm while the rest of us are making real careers. But hey, at least you can say you're independent, right?" Jessica had laughed again, a sharp sound like breaking glass. "Oh, darling, be nice. Not everyone can be as successful as you." I'd felt the weight of my grandmother's antique locket around my neck, her final gift to me before she passed. She had been the only one who believed in me, who supported my dreams with more than just empty words. "Success comes in many forms, Marcus," I'd said quietly. Sure, he'd waved his hand dismissively. "Speaking of success, did you hear Sterling's CEO is actually coming to the wedding reception tonight? Mr. Harrison himself. He never attends employee events, but for me..." He'd puffed up with pride. I'd known exactly why James Harrison was attending. He wanted to discuss the potential buyout of Sterling Industries, a discussion he'd been trying to have with me for weeks. We'd exchanged emails and had several phone conversations, though we'd never met in person before tonight. I'd been deliberately delaying, wanting to see how desperate they'd become. "That's wonderful," I'd murmured, hiding my smile behind my champagne glass. "Try not to embarrass me when he arrives," Marcus had added. "Just stay in the background. This is important for my career." Now, as Harrison stood before me, greeting the CEO he'd been corresponding with for weeks, Marcus's perfect wedding was quickly becoming the talk of the corporate world, but not for the reasons he'd hoped. My mother, always obsessed with appearances, tried desperately to salvage the situation. "Sophie, darling," she gushed, suddenly appearing at my side. "Why didn't you tell us about your position?" I took another sip of champagne, savoring the moment. "You never asked, Mom. You were all too busy celebrating Marcus's achievements to care about my little consulting job." Harrison was still standing nearby, looking both amused and uncomfortable. "Ms. Mitchell, I had no idea this was a family event for you. Perhaps we could discuss the merger." "Merger?" Marcus interrupted, his face shifting from shock to panic. He grabbed my arm, fingers digging in painfully. "What merger?" I carefully removed his hand, keeping my voice level. "The one where Aurora Consulting is considering buying Sterling Industries." I turned to Harrison. "Though after tonight I'm having second thoughts about the acquisition." Marcus went pale. Jessica, his new bride, looked like she might faint. But that would make you..." "Your boss," I finished for him. "Yes, it would. Interesting how life works out, isn't it?" My father finally found his voice, pushing through the crowd that had gathered around us. "Now wait just a minute," he blustered, his face red. "You can't just come here and ruin your brother's wedding with these claims." Harrison cleared his throat. "I assure you, sir, your daughter is exactly who she says she is. Aurora Consulting is the largest business advisory firm in the country, and Ms. Mitchell founded it from the ground up. I've been researching her company thoroughly for the past 6 months as we've explored this potential merger." I watched my father's face as the truth sank in. This was the man who had told me 10 years ago that I was dreaming too big when I said I wanted to start my own company. The man who had used every connection he had to help Marcus climb the corporate ladder while telling me to be realistic about my goals. But the money," my mother stammered. "All those times you said you couldn't help with family expenses." "Oh, you mean like the $50,000 you borrowed from my savings for Marcus's MBA?" I kept my voice calm, but I could feel years of resentment bubbling up. "The money you never paid back. Because, and I quote, Marcus needs it more for his future." Jessica stepped forward, her wedding dress rustling. "Marcus, darling, did you know about this? About her company?" "Of course not," he snapped, then tried to compose himself. She's always been jealous of my success. This must be some kind of mistake." Harrison raised an eyebrow. "The only mistake, Mr. Mitchell, was apparently your understanding of your sister's position in the business world. Aurora Consulting's annual revenue is more than Sterling Industries has made in the past 5 years combined." The ballroom had gone completely silent. Every guest was watching our family drama unfold like it was live theater. "I think," I said quietly, "we should continue this discussion somewhere more private." I nodded to Harrison. "James, would you mind giving me a moment with my family?" He nodded gracefully and stepped away. I led my family to a private room off the main ballroom, closing the door behind us. The silence was deafening. "How dare you?" Marcus finally exploded. "This is my wedding day. You couldn't just let me have this one thing." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. One thing? You've had everything handed to you your entire life. Dad's connections got you into Sterling. Mom's jewelry paid for your MBA. My savings funded your startup attempts. Meanwhile, I built something real, something lasting, completely on my own. We were trying to protect you, my mother insisted, wringing her hands. The business world is so cruel to women. No, Mom, you weren't protecting me. You were dismissing me. Every achievement, every milestone, you brushed them all aside because they didn't fit your narrative of who I should be. My father stepped forward, his business instincts finally kicking in. Now, Sophie, let's be reasonable. We're family. Surely we can work something out that benefits everyone. You mean now that you know I'm successful, you want to be part of it? I shook my head. The merger with Sterling was a courtesy to Harrison. He's a good CEO dealing with a bad board. But after tonight, I met Marcus's eyes. I think it's time for some changes. You can't do this, Marcus whispered, his arrogance finally cracking. Your position was always built on sand, Marcus. You've lost 3 major clients this year alone. The only reason you still have a job is because of your connection to Jessica's family. I straightened my simple navy dress. But don't worry, when Aurora acquires Sterling, we'll find a position suited to your actual qualifications. Jessica let out a small sob. My father won't let this happen. He's on the board. Your father, I said gently, called me last week to make sure the merger goes through. Sterling Industries is drowning in debt, and Aurora Consulting is their only lifeline. As the daughter of a board member, you should know how bad things have gotten. The gravity of the situation finally seemed to hit Marcus. His legs gave out and he sank into a nearby chair. All this time, while we were mocking you, you were building an empire. I tried to tell you, all of you, so many times, but you never listened. You were too busy planning Marcus's next promotion, too focused on maintaining the perfect family image. I moved toward the door. Well, now you know the truth, and things are going to change. Sophie, please, my mother called out as I reached for the handle. We're still family. I paused, my hand on the door. Family? I turned back to face them. Family supports each other, family listens. Family doesn't mock and dismiss and tear down. You weren't family when I was struggling. You don't get to claim family now that I'm successful. With that, I opened the door and walked back into the ballroom, leaving them to process the new reality of our family dynamic. Harrison was waiting for me near the bar, a knowing look in his eyes. Shall we discuss the merger terms, Ms. Mitchell? He asked quietly. I nodded, a small smile playing at my lips. Yes, James. I think it's time to reshape Sterling Industries, starting with the management structure. As we walked away to discuss business, I could feel my family's eyes on my back. The simple navy dress I'd chosen to seem understated now felt like armor. They had spent years underestimating me, dismissing my achievements, treating me like the family disappointment. But now they knew exactly who I was, and this was just the beginning of their education. The weeks following Marcus's wedding were exactly what I expected, a hurricane of family drama, desperate attempts at reconciliation, and not so subtle handling. My phone buzzed constantly with messages. Sophie, darling, let's discuss this like family. Mom, your brother is devastated. How could you do this to him? Dad, we need to talk about my position at Sterling. Marcus, he needs you. Jessica. I ignored them all. I had a merger to complete. The morning of the Sterling Industries board meeting, 3 weeks after the wedding, I stood in my office on the top floor of Aurora Consulting's headquarters, adjusting my suit jacket. This wasn't the simple navy dress from the wedding. Today I wore a tailored black Armani suit that screamed power and authority. No more hiding. My assistant Emma knocked on the door. Your brother is here again, Ms. Mitchell, 3rd time this week. I sighed, checking my watch. Send him in. Might as well deal with this before the board meeting. Marcus walked in looking disheveled, a far cry from his usual polished appearance. His designer suit was wrinkled, his tie slightly askew. Sophie, please, you have to listen to me. I'm listening, I said, sitting behind my desk, though I'm not sure what's left to say after your 20 voicemails and 37 texts. He ran a hand through his hair. Look, I know I was awful at the wedding. I know I've been dismissive of your work, but you can't just take over Sterling Industries. My whole life is there. Your whole life, I repeated slowly, was handed to you. Every opportunity, every promotion, every success, it was all arranged by Dad or bought with someone else's money, usually mine. That's not fair. Not fair? I stood up, placing both hands on my desk. What's not fair was using my savings for your MBA without asking. What's not fair was mocking my tiny firm while I built an empire. What's not fair was treating me like a failure while I succeeded beyond anything you could imagine. I'm sorry, he whispered. And for the first time, I thought he might actually mean it. Sorry doesn't change the past, Marcus. And it doesn't change what's about to happen. I checked my watch again. The board meeting starts in an hour. I suggest you prepare yourself. What's going to happen to me? I sat back down, studying him. That depends on you. Aurora Consulting rewards competence, not connections. If you want to keep a position at Sterling after the merger, you'll have to earn it. Actually earn it. His face paled. You mean starting from the bottom? Learning the business properly? No shortcuts, no special treatment? I held up a hand as he started to protest. It's that, or severance, your choice. Just then, my office door opened again. This time, it was my parents barging in despite Emma's protests. They must have sweet-talked their way past the reception desk and followed Marcus up, a tactic they'd used countless times to bypass gatekeepers in their social circle. Sophie, my mother started, her voice quivering, we've been trying to reach you for weeks. I've been busy, I replied coolly. Running my tiny firm takes a lot of work. My father stepped forward, his face set in what I recognized as his negotiation expression. Honey, we need to talk about this rationally. You can't just destroy your brother's career over some past misunderstandings. Misunderstandings? I laughed. Is that what we're calling years of dismissal and disrespect now? We made mistakes, my mother admitted, wringing her hands. But we're family. Surely that counts for something. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out an old photo, the last family portrait we took before I started Aurora Consulting 8 years ago. In it, I stood slightly apart from the others, wearing a simple dress while they were all in designer clothes. Even then, I was an outsider in my own family. Family counted for something when I needed support starting my business. It counted when I was working 18-hour days building my company. It counted all those times you chose to celebrate Marcus's minor promotions while ignoring my major achievements. I set the photo down, but now it's just business. A knock at my door interrupted us. Emma poked her head in. Miss Mitchell, the board is gathering. I stood up, straightening my jacket. Thank you, Emma. I'll be right there. I turned to my family. You're welcome to stay and watch the meeting on the monitors in the waiting area. I think it'll be educational. The Sterling Industries boardroom fell silent as I walked in. 15 pairs of eyes followed me to the head of the table, where James Harrison stood to greet me. Ms. Mitchell, thank you for joining us. Shall we begin? The next hour was a master class in corporate restructuring. I laid out Aurora's plans for Sterling, department by department, position by position. By the end, several board members were nodding appreciatively, while others looked shell-shocked. And finally, I concluded, we'll be implementing a complete overhaul of the management structure. No more positions based on connections rather than competence. Through the glass walls, I could see my family watching from the waiting area. Marcus had sunk into a chair, his head in his hands. My parents stood rigid, finally understanding the full scope of my power. After the meeting, Harrison approached me. Brilliant presentation, as always. Though I have to ask, your brother's position, will it be handled fairly? I assured him. If he's willing to work for it, there's a place for him, starting in entry-level sales. Harrison nodded approvingly. You're more generous than many would be in your position. This isn't about revenge, I said, gathering my papers. It's about building something lasting, something real. When I walked out to the waiting area, my family was still there. They looked different now, smaller somehow, less intimidating than they'd seemed all those years ago. So that's it? Marcus asked. Everything quietly changes, just like that? Everything changed years ago, Marcus. You just didn't notice because you were too busy looking down on me. I turned to my parents. The company will be sending over new employment contracts tomorrow. I suggest you all read them carefully. Sophie, my mother stepped forward, tears in her eyes. We were wrong about you. So wrong. Can't we start over? I thought about all the dinners where they'd ignored my achievements, all the family events where they'd treated me like an afterthought, all the times they'd prioritized Marcus's ambitions over my dreams. Starting over would mean forgetting the past, I said finally, and I don't want to forget. Those years of dismissal and disrespect taught me valuable lessons about self-reliance and determination. They made me who I am. And who are you? My father asked softly. I'm the woman who built a billion-dollar company while you were all too busy mocking her tiny firm to notice. I'm the CEO who just acquired the company you thought was the pinnacle of success. And I'm the daughter who finally stopped seeking your approval and found her own path instead. I started walking toward the elevator, then paused and looked back. The contracts will be here tomorrow. Your choice whether to sign them or not, but either way, things will never go back to how they were. As the elevator doors closed, I caught one last glimpse of my family standing there in the waiting room of the company I built, finally seeing me clearly for the first time. That night in my penthouse office, I took out my grandmother's locket, the one piece of family history I truly cherished. Inside was a small note she'd written years ago. Success isn't about who believes in you at the end. It's about believing in yourself from the beginning. I smiled, thinking about how far I'd come from that overlooked daughter in the family portrait. Marcus's wedding had just been the beginning. Now everyone knew exactly who I was. Not the family disappointment, but the force that had reshaped their entire world. And somehow, that felt better than any revenge could.